testing centre in Wellington today, showing a mixture of calmness and anxiety. Most people felt it was their duty to get tested, having been caught out at a location of interest or with minor symptoms.
Oh yeah, definitely unsettling.
It does worry me, yes, and I mean it is what it is. I just do my part, and it's better to be safe than sorry in these situations. So
yes, it's quite scary because we were quite safe in the bubble.
I don't think I was there at the same time. He really was. I just wanted to be safe and make sure.
At times, there were up to 100 people queuing from Taranaki Street around the corner onto Arthur Street, and dozens of cars were driving through the testing clinic. Many were being turned away if they hadn't booked a time and were handed information to call Healthline by the staff managing the site, a nurse, a road worker and a parking warden. Te Papa's chief executive says thousands of people were in the museum at the same time as the infected traveller. The Sydney man attended the Surrealist art exhibition between 4 p.m. and 5:45 p.m. on Saturday, June 19th. About 600 people were at the museum's Surrealist art exhibition at that time and now need to self-isolate for 14 days. Chief Executive Courtney Johnston, considered a close contact of the case, says Te Papa had a large number of people through on Saturday.
We're looking at about 2,000 to 2,500 people having been through the museum that afternoon. We would have several dozen staff on deck, depending on how busy we are with functions as well as our normal exhibition activity.
Courtney Johnston says the museum is closed today and will stay open tomorrow at 9 a.m. and tomorrow it will open at 9 a.m. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says health officials have rapidly tracked the person's movements around the capital.
In this case, we had someone who used the QR codes. They could give us places of interest and time. Health then have to assess the likelihood of someone being in that same venue of being at risk. That information was put out first thing this morning. Officials have worked quickly here and I am confident in their response.
Wellington restaurants and cafes are already having weekend bookings fall through as the city prepares to move up to alert level 2. Under the new restrictions, which come into effect at 6 o'clock tonight, venues can remain open but cannot host more than 100 people. 1 metre physical distancing is required between groups and there must be at least 1 metre between tables. Customers must be seated and only one server is to serve at any table. People in Sydney are being urged to take the latest COVID-19 outbreak seriously after 13 new cases were discovered since last night. New restrictions are being introduced in the city and areas nearby, including limits on travel, household gatherings and mandatory seating at cafes and bars. Other states and territories have been closing their borders with Sydney. It's 4 minutes past 5. Spinner Ravi Ashwin says that unless India scores plenty of runs in the first session, they're likely to shut up shop and play for a draw on the final day of cricket's World Test Championship final in Southampton. The test is evenly poised with India set to resume on 64 for 2 in their second innings, a lead of 32 runs. Ashwin concedes it'll be difficult for India to push for victory.
It's going to be very, very important the first hour of play tomorrow. If we can get through it and get a few runs and then really try and set up something in the back half of the day, because you've played for all these years and you'd want to see something come out there. But 98 overs is a little too less from our perspective.
The forecast is for fine weather, so a full day's play is likely. Back with the All Blacks for the first time in 2 years, Lock Brodie Retallick says he didn't do much analysis of the side's inconsistent form in his absence. Retallick has been playing in Japan for the Kobe Steelers since the 2019 World Cup. He missed last year's 6 tests, including the All Blacks' first ever loss to Argentina, but is set to play against Tonga and Fiji over the next couple of weeks.
I was only watching from TV, and when I watch on TV I just watch like a spectator. I don't try and analyse it too much. Obviously there's some different circumstances happening around the world, and it's Test rugby, it's not always going to go one way, so I guess now I can just try and do my part to make sure that we come out each Saturday with a win.
Meanwhile, the Māori All Blacks match against Manu Samoa in Wellington on Saturday will be played without a crowd after the region moved to alert level 2. That's the news.
A COVID-19 case in Wellington.
We will be looking at whether other measures might be required, wider use of masks, potentially any restrictions on gathering size for a period.
Which came from Sydney.
This is the first time that a person who has tested positive to COVID was able to travel to New Zealand under the flight bubble arrangement.
Should we have closed the bubble earlier?
As soon as the Delta variant was spreading in Sydney, there was a very good argument to close the bubble immediately.
Keeping you informed. Morning reports weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula, fine apart from a few showers north of Kaikohe until this evening. Waikato, Waitomo and Taumaranui, also Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Generally fine, cloud and a few showers developing tomorrow night. Gisborne to Wairarapa, often cloudy with coastal showers tonight, fine tomorrow. Taranaki to Wellington, including Taihape, fine tonight, partly cloudy tomorrow with a few showers for most but only brief morning showers for Wellington. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland, partly cloudy. Showers about Stewart Island. Scattered rain developing in Southland and Otago lakes tomorrow night. Bulla and Westland mainly fine at first, but a few showers developing tonight, turning to rain in southern Westland late tomorrow. Fiordland, showers turning to rain tomorrow afternoon or evening with heavy falls. Chatham Islands, partly cloudy with a few showers. RNZ National. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Kia ora rā, Susanna. Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. In just under an hour, the Wellington region moves into COVID alert level 2, so social distancing. No gatherings over 100 and strict rules for hospo venues, face masks where possible. Schools and childcare centres are still open. The shift in levels comes after a tourist from Australia who was probably infected with COVID-19 at the time hit a bunch of popular hotspots. The list is long. Multiple cafes, a packed bar, Te Papa Museum, a supermarket, bookstore, hotel, chemist. The full list is on the Health Ministry's website. And tonight, thousands of people have been forced to self-isolate for between 5 and 14 days and get tested. The man who tested positive after returning to Sydney on Monday works at a health centre in Bondi, the epicentre of the latest community outbreak there. And it's since been discovered a person infected with the virus had been at his work. Here, 4 close contacts of the COVID-positive tourist have so far all tested negative. COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins joins me now. Good evening, Minister.
Good evening.
What is the latest? Do we know the variant?
No, we don't have the genome sequencing result back yet, or at least I've just spent the last hour and a half in a select committee. We hadn't had it back before I went into that meeting.
And no further positive cases? What about this person's partner?
I haven't had a confirmed result notified to me yet of the partner's case, test results. What I do know is that the 4 close contacts in New Zealand have all tested negative, so that's a good start for us.
But, well, it's early days though, isn't it, Minister, because they're suggesting people who are close contacts get tested at day 5, so we're not there yet, are we?
That's right. It's a good start, like I said, but it is a start.
OK, so what kind of numbers are we talking here with people having to self-isolate?
We don't yet know at this point. We've got 2 potential exposure events which could involve quite a significant number of people. So a pub, Fizzy Pub, and the exhibition at the museum, which we know have quite large numbers of people. We're likely to have people in relatively close proximity to one another. Working our way through, continuing to identify more locations of interest, publish those as soon as we get that information. You've probably actually got the more up-to-date list than I've got. We try and get that information out as quickly as we can.
So what's your strategy here, Minister? Are contact tracers going to make contact with every single individual who is considered to be a close contact? Because as you've identified, that could be thousands of people.
Well, I guess we've identified the close contacts, so that's the people who are known to the person, who spent periods of time in close proximity to them. What we don't know at this point, for example, is in the bar, whether they were standing next to someone for a prolonged period of time, whether they were sitting next to someone for a long period of time. So therefore, we're going through the exercise of sending out push notifications to people so that they know that they've been in a place which is a location of interest. We're publishing those locations of interest so that people know that they should come forward, isolate, get tested.
So who are the contact tracers actually making contact with?
Well, they'll be making contact with people that we have contact information for, but again...
So what, if you were in Te Papa, in that exhibition room at the same time as this person, would you be expecting a call from the contact tracers? I'm just trying to get a feel, Minister, for how big a job this is for the contact tracers and where you're drawing the line around who you want to directly reach out to.
No, we don't have records for everybody who was in those locations. So if they've scanned in using their QR codes, they will get a push notification from us. That is, a notice will pop up on their phone that says, you've been in a location of interest, please get in touch. And it will have information for how people can get in touch. But people who haven't scanned using the QR code system, they will need to self-identify that they've been in one of the locations of interest. They'll need to contact Healthline, and then they will be talked through the process from there.
Given the number of people who are having to self-isolate, because we know there's about 2,500 from Te Papa, as you say, the pub was packed and there's numerous other locations of interest. This is, in essence, a targeted lockdown, isn't it? So why not go the whole hog and just lock down the region for 3 days until you work out what's going on, like you have done in the past in Auckland?
If you look at the potential chain of transmission, providing we get on top of this quickly, providing we get people doing the right thing and isolating where they're required to isolate, then we won't need to do that. We won't need to put everybody else to that significant cost. We can contact trace our way out of it.
But you've just indicated that they're not going to be actually contact tracing every individual. This person has been walking around Wellington for a number of days, considered to be infectious, and we're now at Wednesday. So we're kind of behind the 8 ball, aren't we?
Well, at this point, we're not seeing any positive results. So this is the first time we've escalated alert levels without there being a single new positive result in New Zealand. So this is a precautionary measure. It's about saying, well, if there are any positive cases out there, while we go through the process of making sure they're isolated, we want to minimise the risk of them being spread, certainly minimise the risk of any significant spreading events, and that's what the alert level escalation for Wellington is designed to do.
Okay, so the freeze on travel to New South Wales, 72-hour pause, right? What's your thinking? Because I'm just wondering what it would take to shut this thing down for a whole lot longer, the whole Trans-Tasman bubble.
Look, the pause with New South Wales may well be extended. The decision to impose the pause with New South Wales was actually made before we were even aware of this case. And it was on the basis that we were starting to see cases in New South Wales where there wasn't a clear link to the existing cluster that they're dealing with. Up until that point, all of the cases that had been identified were people who were already isolating because they were close contacts of another existing case. And so therefore the contact tracing system was working. What we saw yesterday, and this was the first time in this particular cluster, was that there were a couple of cases popped up that didn't have an apparent link. That's the sort of circumstances where we do a pause while they get on top of that and identify the extent of it.
Would you accept it's inevitable that you're going to have to push that pause out because you don't know who all these people are who have had relatively close contact with these individuals? There's potentially thousands, and 72 hours doesn't give you enough time to get the test results because some people shouldn't be tested for another few days.
I think there's a reasonable likelihood that the pause on travel to and from New South Wales from New Zealand will continue. But
how long for, do you reckon, Minister?
Well, it will depend on what we know in 72 hours' time.
Okay, so the close contacts, the 4 close contacts you've identified, 2 of them live in Tauranga. How did they get home?
I don't have that information, sorry.
So you don't know if they flew or they took any kind of transport that involved other people?
Our contact tracers will have that information. I don't have that information with me.
Now, the infected person we heard today works at a medical facility in Bondi, right? Bondi is the focus of this outbreak in Sydney at the moment. Should they have got on the plane in the first place?
Well, at the time they got on the plane, there were only 4 cases in this cluster, so it grew reasonably over a period of 2 or 3 days from the late weekend through to early this week. So when they got onto the plane, it was still looking like a very small and contained outbreak, which had a clear link to the border. It grew quite quickly, starting from a few days ago, and that's again one of the reasons why we factored that in when we decided to impose the pause.
Minister, we're almost out of time. Can I get 2 quick answers, please? Was this person notified that a positive COVID case had turned up at the clinic while they were in Australia, here in New Zealand? Were they told that?
Sorry, I don't have that information, no.
Okay, and the other thing is, do we do temperature checks at the airport?
Yes, we do random temperature checking at the airport, but I can say, having gone and visited Wellington Airport, that everyone coming in through Wellington Airport goes through a temperature check machine.
So was that guy temperature checked before he boarded the plane back to Sydney?
I don't know whether they're doing them for departures. I know they're doing them for arrivals, so...
Appreciate your time this evening. That's the COVID Response Minister, Chris Hipkins. It is 16 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And still to come on the program, we'll speak to the CEO of Te Papa, which has been forced to close after the Sydney tourist visited. Thousands of people in Wellington have been told to isolate and get tested, some for as long as 2 weeks, depending on where they were. The Central City Community Testing Centre was inundated with people getting a swab today. The list of locations of interest continues to grow tonight, all places the tourists from Sydney visited. Our reporter Harry Locke and cameraman Dom Thomas have the story.
It didn't take long for the queues to form at Wellington's Community Testing Centre in the heart of the CBD. There was a continuous flow of both walk-ups and drive-ups with people keen to get a test. At one point this afternoon, around 100 people were waiting in line.
I work at my workplace at Te Papa, so as soon as we got the news, we need to go home as soon as possible and get the test done.
Why did I get tested? I was just at the Te Papa exhibition on the weekend and I had a pint at Jack Hackett's, so I thought it'd be better to be safe than sorry.
We were at the Four Kings bar, so that's below the JJ Hackett's, and both used the bathroom, so yeah, same location.
It wasn't just people being tested at the Taranaki Street drive-through centre, with one car suffering a breakdown while its driver was being tested. A mechanic was called to give the car a swab of its own, adding extra anxiety for the driver on an already anxious day for those getting a test.
Oh yeah, definitely unsettling. We found it this morning by just
9 a.m. I'd say, yeah.
Corporate communications from our workplaces and stuff like that, so yeah.
Yes, it's quite scary because we were quite safe in the bubble, but as it's spread widely, and we know it's very contagious and it spread so fast, and it's a Delta version, we have heard, so it's 50 times stronger. So it's better to be safe than to be sorry. So that's our main protocol.
It does worry me, yes, and so I mean, it is what it is. I just do my part, and it's better to be safe than sorry in these situations. So that is what it is, yeah.
We are experiencing exceptional call volume and cannot answer your call right now.
This is the voice message greeting those trying to get in touch with Healthline. A Health Ministry spokesperson says they're getting 3 times the volume of calls today than they did yesterday. An extra 30 operators have been brought in to take calls, with 40 more coming on later. Meanwhile, several businesses have quickly had to adapt after suddenly finding themselves locations of interest. The Lido restaurant was open to customers this morning and hadn't told some customers it had become a location of interest. Once the ministry had been in touch, staff put a sign on the door and didn't let any new customers in. Yumi Shi and Kunyu Wang were dining at the time and weren't told by staff that the cafe had become a location of interest.
When did you know that the person from Australia who had COVID was here the other day?
No, we don't know that. He has been here before.
He was here just on Saturday.
Really? We didn't really know that.
The cafe didn't tell you, or no one told you?
I didn't get the information.
Yeah.
You think you should have?
Sorry. Yeah, we just walked past by and we just feel like maybe we should have a brunch together. So
yeah.
And now we chose this, but actually we just have no idea of what really happened here.
Okay. The Sydney tourist visited Unichem Pharmacy on Lambton Quay the morning he arrived. Their regional manager Bronwyn Shepherd says they decided to close the shop early this morning.
We were advised that we didn't need to close, and we chose to close for a couple of reasons, but one of them being just to give the staff a bit of a breather so that we could make sure we do follow that full process and work with public health, and also to give it another sort of deep clean as well.
She says it was fairly quiet when the person visited on Saturday, but the 3 staff members who were working are now at home isolating. While the pharmacy closed its doors today, people were still able to pick up their prescriptions. The tourist also went to Irish pub Jack Hackett's on Saturday night, Unity Books and the Weta Cave shop in Miramar. Also on the list was Te Papa, which closed this morning.
Doors opening.
This was going to be the star attraction to this year's T-Tech conference held at Te Papa just over there. It's a fully autonomous driverless shuttle, which the members of the public were going to be able to come and have a ride. But the closure of Te Papa means today that is no longer possible. Simon McManus is the Executive Officer of Intelligent Transport Systems NZ and was running the conference.
We've had months of preparation, lots of volunteers committing their time. Obviously, the speakers themselves have put times into their presentations as well. So that's all quite disappointing, obviously, to miss out on that.
With the first test results due back tomorrow, there is now some uncertainty about what the next few days will bring for businesses and Wellingtonians. People are being encouraged to work from home if they can, and there are reminders to wear face coverings on public transport.
And ko taku manuhiri anai nei ko Harry Locke. Harry joins us live from Wellington and he's at a testing station. Hi Harry, this list of locations of interest is just getting longer, isn't it?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yes, indeed it is. And actually what we're finding out now from the Ministry of Health is a bit more detail around the person's movements while they were at Wellington Airport. So they arrived in Friday night, and I can say that so the new location is Wellington Airport Customs, and that's between 11:35 on Friday night to 12:48 a.m. on Saturday morning. Now, for people who were at Customs, passing through Customs at that time, the advice from the Ministry of Health is to monitor symptoms. So there is no requirement to get a test, but if symptoms develop, that is when you are then asked to get a test. And now the same advice goes for anyone who was at Wellington Airport on Monday morning when the person was then leaving to go back to Sydney. If you were in the airport around that time, and let me just get the exact time for you, so that's between 8:30 and 10:30 a.m. It is the same advice. So monitor symptoms, and if symptoms do develop over the next 2 weeks, go get a test. However, for those people who were at the food court, in a seated area at the food court, around that time as well, on Monday morning, the advice is to go home and get a test within the next 5 days. And for the next 2 weeks, monitor symptoms, and that's even if you do end up getting a negative test.
Wow, we're talking about a bunch of people here, and we know at Te Papa there was huge crowds there at the Surrealist exhibition, but also some school students have been caught up in all of this. Tell me about the school ball, Harry.
Yes, exactly. So this is Whitby Collegiate, a school around here in Wellington. And what this was actually just 8 staff members who arrived at Te Papa before the 5:45 p.m. cut-off, which was the time period which the Ministry of Health says is kind of the infection period. So anyone who was around Te Papa and specifically at the Surrealist exhibition should monitor their symptoms and go get a test as well. For most of the school, this was a senior school ball. For most of the school, that doesn't apply to them. They arrived actually far beyond that 5:45 p.m. But for the 8 staff members, they arrived a bit earlier to set up, and so they are caught up on it. Now, they are regarded as casual plus contacts. They have gone home to be tested and self-isolate, but actually as a result of that, the school says that they are now closed. They're closed today, and they'll be closed, hopefully, opening again on Monday. And partly that was because of health reasons, although the Ministry of Health didn't actually say they needed to close. But partly also it was because, losing 8 staff members is quite a big deal for a school, and they just weren't able to continue teaching, essentially.
Absolutely. So level 2, right? You're just over half an hour away from level 2. That means no gatherings of more than 100 people. So what events have been affected by that?
Exactly, yeah, quite a lot actually. I mean, there is the Dominion Post Sport and Recreation Awards were meant to go ahead tonight. That was at the TSB Arena. 900 people scheduled to attend. That has unfortunately been canned, or not canned, I should say. It's now gone online, so it will still be live streamed. You can still watch it, but unfortunately for those 900 people, it won't be going ahead. Otherwise, we had the Wellington Marathon beginning that was meant to be this weekend, I think. That is now being postponed. They're looking to move it to October the 10th or 17th, but I mean, there is so much to organise with that. You need to go to the council to get road closures and check with the stadium, which is obviously where it's starting, to make sure that will be a viable date for them to go ahead. I'll just quickly mention the Opera New Zealand has unfortunately had to cancel the Marriage of Figaro, and now that's a real shame because I think they've previously had to cancel that exact same production as well. Manu Samoa against the Māori All Blacks, that is happening Wellington 7:30 p.m. on Saturday. That match is going ahead, but unfortunately for the people who have tickets and were meant to be going, they won't be able to go anymore. On some slightly more positive news, Doc Edge, the documentary festival, that is still going ahead. That's being held at the Roxy Cinema in Miramar, less than 100 capacity, so that is still able to go ahead.
Nā mihi mō te rā, Harry. Thanks so much. That is Harry Locke, who was outside a testing station there in Wellington. It is 25 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai, you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Ho mai o whakaro, we would love your feedback. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Nō reira anei nā kaupapa mō te hōtaka nei. What we're talking about is, well, obviously going to level 2 in Wellington. How is it affecting you? Are you one of the people who are now stuck at home for 14 days? Where did you go on the weekend where this tourist was too? Do get in touch. It's the surrealist exhibition that turned real world surreal. Te Papa's had to shut up shop for 2 days for a deep clean after the COVID positive tourist from Australia visited the museum and its surrealist masterpieces exhibit while they were probably contagious. And 2,500 others who were there at the same time now have to isolate for anything between 5 and 14 days, depending on what part of the museum they were in. The exact details are on the Ministry of Health's website under current locations of interest. But the visitor from Oz was at Te Papa on Saturday between 3:05pm and 5:45pm. Needless to say, Te Papa boss Courtney Johnston wasn't in the office when we called.
I'm isolating at home.
How many days have you got?
I'm not sure yet. I'm booking in for my test and I'll know more after that.
When and how did you find out that Te Papa was a place of interest?
We found out when the list of locations were provided to the public this morning.
Right, so you didn't get any forewarning or a heads up?
No, we didn't.
Now, there's 2 sites within Te Papa that are listed. Can you explain which areas people are supposed to be watching out for?
Yeah, so there's the museum as a whole from 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then there's the time that we know that the visitors spent in the surrealist exhibition itself, which is up on level 4.
So has someone gone through your CCTV to pinpoint them?
No, I don't believe so. We're working off the contact tracing information.
Okay. And so where were you while they were there?
I visited the surrealist art exhibition at the same time that they did.
Okay, so potentially you're in isolation for up to 14 days, according to the Ministry advice. How many staff from Te Papa would be in the same boat?
We're working through that at the moment. We've been in direct contact with almost all of our staff who were working on Saturday afternoon. So we had venue staff plus our front of house staff. So I don't have an exact count at the moment, but we've been in touch with almost everyone.
And what was it like on that day in terms of how busy, was it packed? Give us an idea of the size of the rooms we're talking about here too.
The rooms are our normal exhibition galleries, so they're quite spacious. People were moving very carefully because the artworks are very precious, but it was a busy afternoon, yes.
Any idea how many people might have been there?
We're looking at about 2,000 to 2,500 people having been through the museum that afternoon.
2,000 to 2,500 people?
Yes.
Right, pretty popular then. And also, on any given day, how many staff would you have on deck as well?
We would have several dozen staff on deck, depending on how busy we are with functions as well as our normal exhibition activities.
So, Te Papa is closed right now, still?
Yes, we're closed today and we'll be closed tomorrow as well.
What's happening?
We're doing a deep clean. We're contacting all of our staff and making sure that they're following the Ministry of Health guidelines, and then we'll keep reassessing tomorrow as we get more information so that we know that we're able to open as soon as possible once we know that that's safe for our visitors and safe for our people.
So, Courtney, what does a deep clean involve?
These are all plans that we put in place last year. We got advice externally, and so I don't know the exact details of that, but we'll be working through that.
So you actually have a COVID plan at the museum, do you?
Yeah, we put a lot of planning in place last year, so we know that all our plans are there ready to roll out.
And what does a deep clean mean for you in terms of the works that might be displayed in the museum as well?
Yeah, that's very, very good question. It does mean being very careful with all of that. Luckily in surrealist art, everything is glazed or it's behind vitrines, which are like clear boxes, so we'll be cleaning around all of those surfaces.
But in the general parts of the museum, is there anything you have to take down or move in order to facilitate this?
No, all of our cleaning so far has been done normally. We also put in a heightened cleaning regime that we've kept in place last year. So all those kind of common contact points like handrails, we've been cleaning them really regularly.
So 2 days, basically, you'll be shut down for while you get your the venue cleaned. What about staff, though? If you have a bunch of them who are sat at home isolating, which is necessary, do you have the people you need to open?
We're still working through that at the moment. That's part of our considerations as we do the reassessment.
Yeah, have your staff been vaccinated?
Not on site. So if people have been vaccinated, it's been because they're on those higher priority lists otherwise.
Yeah, what do you make of all of this, Courtney?
I mean, you just roll with it, don't you? This is what we've got really used to. We know that we're resilient. We know that we'll bounce back. I'm really proud of the way that the team pulls together at these times. It's all about keeping the public safe and keeping our staff safe. And we know that these situations are a bit ambiguous. You just have to kind of keep your spirits up and work through it.
And you're all get up to work at home?
Yes, I am. I've got my laptop in front of me and I brought a lot of books home and a lot of Post-it notes. So, yeah, ready to go again.
It's iwi haere nei our checkpoint, 30 days to the Tokyo Olympics. So what will it actually be like, and is anyone excited? A birthday party is now the ground zero for COVID cases in Sydney, and we're on a farm in Ashburton where the post-flood clean-up could hit $1 million. So who pays? Homai Ofakaro would love to hear your views on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Minister indicated that pause on the bubble with New South Wales of 72 hours is likely to extend. Should we can it altogether? What do you reckon? Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or the email is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time now for the headlines with Susanna.
Wellington is about to move to alert level 2 after an Australian who visited the capital at the weekend tested positive on his return to Sydney on Monday. All 4 of his close contacts have tested negative, but there are nearly 20 locations of interest. Several events have been cancelled or postponed, including the Dawn Raid topology planned for Saturday. COVID-19 Minister Chris Hipkins told Checkpoint it's still not confirmed whether the infected man has the highly infectious Delta strain. He says a full lockdown in Wellington is not necessary, provided everyone who was in close contact isolates themselves. He says contact tracers will send out push notifications to anyone who scanned the QR code at a location of interest. And Mr Hipkins says the pause on travel with New South Wales is likely to be extended. Hundreds of people have been queuing at Wellington's Taranaki Street Testing Centre, most of whom had been at a location of interest or had minor COVID symptoms. Many were being turned away if they hadn't booked a time. Te Papa's chief executive says 2,500 people were in the museum at the same time as the Sydney case, who was at the Surrealist art exhibition between 4 p.m. and 5:45 p.m. on Saturday, June the 19th. About 600 people who were there at that time need to self-isolate for 14 days. The museum is closed today and tomorrow. People are already cancelling weekend bookings at Wellington restaurants. Under level 2 restrictions, venues cannot host more than 100 people. There must be 1 metre physical distancing between groups. Customers must be seated and only one person can serve at each table. Across the Tasman, people in Sydney are being urged to take the latest outbreak seriously, with 16 new cases detected since last night. New restrictions are being introduced in Greater Sydney, including limits on travel, household gatherings and at cafes and bars. There are now 31 cases linked to the Bondi cluster, and other states and territories have begun closing their borders with New South Wales. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. No mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku manuhiri anai nei, ko Nona Peltier with business news. Nona, the Auditor General's been looking at the ports, right? So what are the conclusions?
Well, there are no conclusions and there are no recommendations, but there are observations. And among them is the idea that there needs to be perhaps a national strategy to manage our supply chain, which goes beyond the ports. It talks about rail, and so on. Now, this is not an initiative of the Auditor General. It's something that the Auditor General is supporting, and it's an initiative of the Ministry of Transport. That strategy is going to take place in the second half of this year, and it's going to take 12 to 18 months to produce. But the strategy could help the ports. Now, the report that the Auditor General did was into the ports. Now, interestingly, the act that covers the ports talks about all ports must be successful, but it doesn't say what success means. So the Auditor General has quite a job of figuring out what that could possibly be, and has suggested that, well, looking at their books, all the ports are profitable. But profit is just one measure of success, surely. And one of the other big issues is their investment. And there is a lot of competition between the ports with these larger ships coming in. And some of them are investing to accommodate these larger ships, but it might not make any sense. And it means that they may not be as performing as well as they could. And I spoke with this fellow named Hugh Jory, who wrote the report for the Auditor General's office. And this is what he had to say.
The supply chain strategy that we understand the Ministry of Transport will be completing will be looking at wider than just the port sector. Will allow New Zealand to determine where the pinch points are in terms of making sure that freight is transported more efficiently through the country, and where growth is happening is being matched by investment.
And that's the sector manager at the Office of the Auditor General, Hugh Jory. Now, that, again, I just want to say that report is going to be quite important, not just for what happens at ports, but really overall, because we've had a lot of issues recently with supply chain. And if we had a national strategy, perhaps some of those things might be mitigated.
Retail wages are on the rise. And this is not surprising, is it, Nona, with all the competition for skilled staff?
Exactly.
Yeah. So what are the numbers looking like?
Interesting that this is one of the biggest increases they've seen in the past, for recent times, a 6.1% increase in wages over the past year to $25.05, which is above the living wage and above the minimum wage. The retailers are saying that that's probably not evenly spread. So if you work for a small retail firm with maybe one or two outlets, you might just be making the minimum wage. If you're working for a national chain, you're likely to be making their average, which is about $26 an hour. And if you're working in Auckland, you're not far behind at $25.99. So you're about the same. So Auckland and national chains pay a bit more. Wellington's one of the worst payers, just under $24 an average there. So I spoke with the retailers about this, and I asked, what's going on. So it's not just that these wages have been going up, but that prices are also starting to edge up as well. And what consumers will probably notice as a result of these increases is fewer sales, less discounting, that kind of thing, rather than prices just going, sky high. But definitely prices are on the rise, and that is something that we are concerned about when we talk about inflation. That's the one thing that's been spooking the markets, as we know, and certainly that's reflected in how the markets have been reacting recently. The Federal Reserve in the United States had to come out, this is just this morning, and kind of put a bit of cold water on the inflation expectations, which has really unsettled the market. And then we saw our own market pick up today. We rose 0.4%. And that's because the inflation fears have been quelled somewhat. And so we rose 52 points to 12,586. And our dollar, it's steadied because the U.S. dollar, because interest rates are tied to inflation, the U.S. dollar settled back down again. So we rose 70 U.S. cents, 92.8 Australian, which is, again, steady where we have been, and 50.3 British pence.
Thanks, Nona. Nona Peltier with Business. Auckland's iconic ASB Showgrounds has gone into liquidation with a very public finger-pointing exercise now playing out. The board is blaming Auckland's crippling COVID-19 lockdowns for the shock decision to close down, but it's also blaming its landlord in a stoush between two major Auckland trusts. Our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
Going, gone, but not to new owners. Instead, $4 million worth of collectible and classic cars, everything from rare Aston Martins through to Holdens, are being driven back out of ASB Showgrounds, with the iconic Auckland events venue going belly up.
To say we're disappointed is an understatement.
Webb's head of collectors cars, Keelan McAleer, says ASB Showgrounds liquidation came out of the blue on Tuesday night. They were supposed to have a big classic car auction here this weekend, but not anymore. Today, huge car carriers were coming through its gates instead of potential car buyers.
Pretty shocked and devastated over what's happened to hear that. Especially we went to such lengths to set it up and make it look incredible. So disappointed for so many people that were meant to come. We already had hundreds of people there.
Showgrounds leadership are blaming the iconic venue's liquidation on disruptions caused by Auckland jumping through the COVID-19 levels. However, board chairman Kim Campbell says a rent dispute with its landlord, the Cornwall Park Trust, is also to blame. That's where it gets messy, with Cornwall Trust Chair Adrian Young-Cooper claiming there is no such dispute.
I don't want to get into detail of what he said, she said. We have a very straightforward method set out under the lease, and we were well engaged with that process. There is nothing unusual about it.
As for Mr Campbell's claims to Stuff that the Cornwall Park Trust wanted to up the showground's annual rent threefold from $750,000 to $2.3 million, Young-Cooper says that simply isn't the case. Ms Young-Cooper says she doesn't even see the back and forth as a dispute.
That's not how I would describe the circumstance. We've been in a rent review process since 2018, and there are very clear provisions under the lease that we've got for how the rent gets settled, and basically it gets settled by valuers provide values, and then if we can't reach agreement, we go to arbitration. That's just a very common method in terms of settling rents.
She says she is surprised by Mr Campbell pointing the finger at Cornwall Park Trust.
I was disappointed to read that. We've been in discussion with the shows board for months, and in fact we've had a lot of discussions with Mr Campbell, and they've been cordial.
Meanwhile, Webb's big car auction isn't the only major event left picking up the pieces. The Baby Show, Auckland Home Show and Food Show were all set to be held at the ASB Showgrounds in the coming months.
So there's a number of expos there. I know there's a film shooting in there at the minute as well. So it's affected a lot of people. It's just unfortunate it had to land slap bang in the middle of our event.
Like those shows, Mr McAleer says Webb's is now scrambling to find a new home for its auction.
We're working on those logistics at the minute. The team is sorting that out, and we'll make an announcement very soon.
For now, the showgrounds remain completely shut off to the public, security vetting anyone coming in and out. A sudden end to its 160-year history.
If you were listening to that on radio, you can catch the video from our two Nicks on our Facebook page. Ashburton's flood-weary farmers are crying out for more financial support to fix what they say is Environment Canterbury's mismanagement of the region's rivers. 3 weeks on since the Canterbury floods ripped through the region, major damage continues to be assessed. While they work to save their land, they say the government's grant offering farmers $3,500 doesn't begin to make a dent with the clean-up bills. Our reporter Alicia Foon and cameraman Nathan McKinnon went to Ashburton to visit one of the worst affected farms.
Almost 30 years of work gone in the space of 24 hours. The carnage left on Daryl Butterick's 170-hectare farm is gobsmacking. What once were green pastures, now a bomb site. Hectares of land are covered in silt, debris and shingle left behind by flood waters. Farming deer, sheep and beef across two separate properties between the north and south branches of the Ashburton River, Daryl was smack bang in the middle, copping the breakout of both rivers during the flooding event 3 weeks ago.
Probably 60-70% of the farm's damaged. Infrastructure is either damaged or gone. A lot of our fences are gone. We've still got livestock out. It's going to be big job getting everything back to where it was.
He says the clean-up will take at least 12 months and the farm's fencing and irrigation infrastructure isn't covered by insurance. The river redirected through his farm, forming a water feature and destroying more than half his farmland, countless fences, irrigation infrastructure and feed which needs to be dried or risk rotting. As for stock loss, he says a handful of heifers were swept away in the floods.
We've still got a few deer out. We might have lost a handful of cattle. We've had a lot of dairy stock from above us washed down. There's roughly 170 that we've found so far. So we've got off reasonably lightly stock loss wise. Others haven't, and we were probably a little bit lucky there.
He believes the rivers have been badly neglected by the Regional Council for decades.
The shingle levels in the North Ashburton were in places up to half the depth of the bank on the paddock sides, which has greatly reduced the capacity of these rivers to carry a lot of water like this, which has gone a long way to the result what we've got now.
Farmers need all the financial support they can get after bearing the brunt of the floods, which he says saved the town of Ashburton from going underwater.
This comes at a massive financial cost to us, we've been hammered. And that's probably the number one priority for us at the moment, is finance.
Daryl's biggest concern is how to pay for the over $1 million worth of damage done to his farm. He's not impressed by the government response.
So far, I think they should be ashamed of themselves, especially when they've come out with 700 and something million for a bridge across Auckland. I think it's woeful, and they need to sort of re-examine their priorities here a little bit.
He wants to see boots on the ground and immediate action to ensure this doesn't happen again.
We need to be confident that these rivers are going to be reasonably safe, because the last thing we want is to be spending a heap of time and effort and money, blood, sweat and tears on the fencing and getting rid of shingle and all the rubbish involved, to turn around and 5 minutes later the river comes back in because they've decided that to drag the chain, getting banks reinstated and holes fixed.
Daryl admits he and his wife are taking it day by day.
Oh, it is quite daunting, the extent of the damage and the work that needs to be done to get us back up to speed. But it's the old story, we just got to put one foot in front of the other and keep marching. So, it's just, get on with it, keep going. As long as we get a feed and a drink, we're all right.
He hopes Jacinda Ardern's visit to Ashburton tomorrow includes answers and a helping hand to meet them in their time of financial need.
In a statement, Ecan Rivers manager Lee Griffiths says they are confident their flood protection infrastructure did its job and don't accept allegations of mismanagement. He says the stock banks on either side of the Ashburton River protected hundreds of millions of dollars worth of assets and prevented many homes from flooding. As assessments are still being done, they're making temporary fixes to flood infrastructure until permanent repairs are possible when the ground dries in spring or summer. It is 10 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki ina pitapita kōrero after the news at 6. The Arthur Allen Thomas rape trial draws to a close. Well, it is just 30 days to the Olympics, but not as we know them. International fans are banned and domestic spectators severely capped. They'll be well spaced and governed by some pretty tight rules. Athletes will be operating in bubbles, eating behind perspex screens with daily COVID tests and temperature checks. And joining me live from Tokyo is CNN correspondent Blake Essig. Hi, Blake. Is anyone there enthusiastic about the games coming?
Well, Lisa, we've been standing out in front of the new National Olympic Stadium where the Olympic ceremony, opening ceremonies are going to be held in about 30 days. And what's been a little different is that you do have people kind of coming by with cameras, kind of showcasing a little bit of that excitement. But I will tell you this, the Olympic Games here for months and months have remained deeply unpopular here in Japan, and that is because the concerns regarding health and safety, and that hasn't changed. I mean, we just over the weekend, the team from Uganda arrived here in Japan, and a coach tested positive for COVID-19 after going through all the protocols, testing twice before getting on a plane, and then testing once again once they arrived here in Japan, and that is where the positive test took place. So no matter what the protocols that have been put in place, the countermeasures to keep people safe, the problem is that there's no guarantees, and the fear that a super spreader event could take place as a result of these games is on the minds of everybody here.
So tell me about the audience then, right? Apart from the weather conditions you've got there at the moment, Blake, let's hope that picks up before the games. But in terms of the audience, are they specially chosen, or are they just going to be random people who have bought a ticket? And what kind of restrictions are on them?
So Lisa, as far as spectators are concerned, as we learned earlier this week, a maximum of 10,000 spectators will be allowed to attend a given competition, or half the number, depending on whichever number is lower based on seating capacity in these venues. But we're actually expecting to find out later today how they plan to decide who is going to be able to attend these events. We've been told that they're looking into a lottery-type system because a lot of these tickets are already sold, but only a fraction of those who have tickets will actually be able to attend these events. And for those that are able to go to the games, very strict restrictions. They're not allowed to cheer. You have to wear a mask. We learned today that no alcohol will be served. And as soon as the event is over, officials are asking that the spectators go home immediately. So, part of the excitement of these Olympics is the atmosphere, interacting with fans, in and out of the stadiums. And you absolutely are going to miss that this time around.
So, okay, the spectators aren't allowed alcohol, Blake, but the athletes are being allowed to bring alcohol into the village, aren't they? But they're not getting the normal condom handout this Olympics.
This is true. Again, these are it's part of the constantly changing rules and regulations. I mean, it really seems to be a daily occurrence, and that really speaks to the logistical nightmare that is these Tokyo 2020 Summer Olympic Games that are trying to be held during a pandemic. Now, the athletes will be allowed to have alcohol inside their rooms, which they will be sharing their 2 beds per room. So, despite preaching the social distance, these athletes are going to be at least sharing a room with one other person. As far as the condoms are concerned, again, this is something that continues to change. We now understand that the condoms, about 150,000 of them, will be distributed, but only once the athletes leave the athletes' village. So, it'll be interesting. Again, this is something that continues to change. We've been looking into it here just because of the, really the contradiction of the idea of, preaching social distance, but, here's a bag of condoms. So, still looking into that, and it seems to be constantly changing.
Thank you for joining us, Blake, and persisting with that weather there in Tokyo. That is CNN correspondent Blake Essig. A proposal to rein horses roaming a small Eastern Bay of Plenty town inn has some residents G'd up. Hoiho have been wandering freely in Opotiki for years, but the council recently proposed stamping down on unwanted horseplay with a new bylaw. Aside from posing a safety risk to motorists, the animals damage fences, stop banks and gardens. Reporter Jean Bell trotted into town to talk to locals.
After years of horses running amok, the Opotiki District Council has voted to ban horses from grazing on council land, while resolving to spend an additional $200,000 a year on boosting its number of animal control staff. It's also proposing a bylaw banning horses from the township. Later this year, the community will get their say. On the streets of Opotiki, one woman says serious traffic accidents have been caused by horses and they can leave a mess in the streets.
What would you see if a horse ran up here now, shitting itself, and there's people all out there in cars? Well, I'd go, hello, where's the owner?
She's happy for people to own horses, but she says people need to keep a closer eye on their animals.
If you don't have a horse, look after it, It's like having a dog or a cat,
But one man who likes the horses says it's dividing the town.
Sometimes horses run amok, but I actually like all the horses around town. What's needed is for people to take a bit better care of them, but I like the horses around town.
Why's that?
It's one of the joys of living in Hicksville. There'll be a hell of a lot for and a hell of a lot against.
Another woman, whose vegetable garden was plundered by roaming horses, thinks people are too lax about caring for them.
Tell you what, for want of better words, they need to kick up the backside. Really, all of them. They don't care, they really don't care. You know, in the days of yore, when we were young, we had horses. We all looked after our horses. Today they think they can just put it in anybody's paddock and expect those people to be responsible for their horses. N-O.
Opotiki District Council's Planning and Regulatory Group Manager, Gerard McCormack, thinks it's a matter of balancing the town's past and future.
And it's the nostalgia of having horses in town against the town that's suddenly developing. We're building factories, the harbour. We've also got a lot more traffic coming into town. So having horses out and about is a lot more visible and people are more aware of it. We've got more heavy trucks coming into town with the rock. So yeah, just the kind of the pressure of development against a historic town that, you know, horses were part of the nostalgia. We're just trying to make it work and make it fit together at this stage.
Mr McCormack says the horses tend to form groups and trot about town, posing a safety risk to motorists. And the council works with the police to round them up.
They come together as horses do, and then there's suddenly 3 or 4 horses rather than just one loose horse running down the road. So it's a safety issue for us on our roads.
Back on the streets of Opotiki, one man, who was a horse rider himself, thinks the council should get tougher on irresponsible owners.
It's a pity to have to ban all horses just because a few can't look after them. And that's always the way, isn't it? But I think if you've got a horse and can't look after it, they may as well take it off you. They don't seem to care. I went driving down here early one morning just about a fortnight ago, and there's two horses and a foal just walking down Bridge Street, and that's pretty common.
Gerard McCormack says the town's equine issues are long-standing, but have worsened in the last year or so.
Since COVID, there's been a lot more horses in town, and with that, with our increased development and growth as a town, there's less space for the horses, so it's almost like a perfect mix. So we've been trying to work with horse owners to manage their horses and keep them secure, but really the town's just got too many horses at the moment, and they're breaking out and coming loose.
The proposal to ban horses from Opotiki will likely go out to public consultation by the end of the year.
Free range hoihoa in Opotiki. If you live in the district, let us know what you think. 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Should they be allowed to roam around or not? A lot of you are getting in touch about COVID. This person says it was obvious with all the regular outbreaks and spreads in Australia that opening the border with Australia would lead to this or worse. I say stop opening the border till 90% vaccinated. Who agrees, says Tim. And this one in saying the travel bubble should never have been allowed. It only takes one person to infect us all, as we can see. We all know this is so blindingly obvious that the bubble is the stupidest idea ever during a global pandemic. For the sake of a few measly tourist dollars, not even a family are travelling to see family, so they aren't spending. Look where we are now because of this ridiculous idea of a bubble. Lunacy. Was the bubble worth it? This listener says a big fat no. Wow, pretty clear on where you stand. And Pete says, you cannot get through to Healthline. It is overloaded and I need advice for my work. This is a bloody shambles. I always suspected the Oz bubble was a mistake. Hey, Pete, get back in touch. Let us know what you're trying to clarify. We might be able to help you with that. Are you talking about one of the places of interest? Tauranga says, Pete from Tauranga says, let's knock the Aussie-New Zealand bubble on the head until our vaccination program has been completed. And another person says, gutted that we had to cancel my mum's big birthday gathering this weekend, all because the government was too slow to close the border when clearly the bubble should have been closed by June 13th. And Ray puts it pretty simply, bleeding obvious, need level 3 right now.
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leatawa ahau. Health authorities are relying on thousands of contacts of the latest COVID case to get in touch with them. The Wellington region is now in level 2 lockdown after an Australian man who spent the weekend in the capital tested positive for COVID-19 after returning to Sydney. The COVID-19 response minister, Chris Hipkins, says it won't be possible for contact tracers to reach out to everyone who came in contact with the man because they don't have their details. There are hundreds of people deemed close contacts because they were in high-risk indoor environments like an exhibition at Te Papa and Jack Hackett's bar. Mr Hipkins told Checkpoint only those who scanned in will be contacted.
So people who haven't scanned using the QR code system, they will need to self-identify that they've been in one of the locations of interest. They'll need to contact Healthline and then they will be talked through the process from there.
Healthline says it's received 3 times as many calls as usual following the announcement of COVID-19 case in Wellington. The phone service has added an extra 30 operators with a further 40 coming on duty later today. There have been complaints about long wait times, with some being unable to get through at all. Healthline says waiting times have varied between 20 minutes to an hour since midday. It says people should only contact Healthline if they were at a location of interest, are experiencing COVID-19 symptoms or have any other health concerns. Further details can be found on the Ministry of Health website. Most Wellington businesses will be able to withstand the changes in COVID-19 alert levels. The head of the Wellington Chamber of Commerce, Simon Arcus, says the government has taken the right precaution to reimpose restrictions in the region. He says a lot of its members have systems in place to cope with the changes.
What we know at level 2 is about 54% of businesses say they can still function pretty well under level 2. It drops dramatically as you go to level 3. The other thing that's on our mind a lot is hospitality. Our people in hospitality obviously at the sharp end of some of this too.
Simon Arcus says the latest COVID risk puts pressure on the government to speed up the vaccine rollout. People in Sydney are being urged to take the latest COVID-19 outbreak seriously, with 13 new cases detected since last night. New restrictions are being introduced in the city and nearby areas, including limits on travel, household gatherings and mandatory seating at cafes and bars. The New South Wales Health Minister Brad Hazzard says everyone must act responsibly.
We've gone from that near and present danger to a very real and present danger, not just in a shopping centre, but right across Sydney. We each have the future of our fellow New South Wales residents and our Sydney residents in our own hands.
Other states and territories have been closing their borders with Sydney. Scientists at the University of Oxford are to start trialling a drug which may help people dealing with COVID-19 at home. Some doctors and health agencies are already promoting the anti-parasite drug to treat the virus, but its efficacy has yet to be proven in clinical trials. The BBC's Rachel Shkara reports.
Even though it hasn't yet been proven as a COVID treatment and global health agencies do not recommend it is used outside clinical trials, there are some promising early signs for the drug. Now, scientists at the University of Oxford will start giving ivermectin to people over the age of 50 suffering at home with symptoms to see if it helps keep them out of hospital. If it works, and it's a big if, the hope is ivermectin could help make COVID-19 a less serious disease for the people most at risk from it.
Arthur Allen Thomas, defence lawyer, has described the case against him as having enormous inconsistencies to the point where he cannot be convicted. Mr Thomas, who spent 9 years wrongly imprisoned for the murders of the crews, now faces 1 rape charge and 4 of indecent assault. The accusations come from 2 women who had 3 other witnesses broadly back their complaints. However, defence lawyer Marie Dryberg QC has told the Manukau District Court the women were dishonest, vindictive and angry and wanted Mr Thomas's money. She said their accounts and that of other Crown witnesses contradicted each other. An Ashburton farmer wants the government to help cover more than $1 million worth of flood damage to his farm. 3 weeks since the Canterbury floods devastated the region, the damage is still being assessed. Farmers are calling for urgent action to help save dozens of farms. About 60 to 70% of Daryl Butterick's 170-hectare farm is destroyed, and he told Checkpoint he feels let down by the government.
So far, I think they should be ashamed of themselves, especially when they've come out with 700 and something million for a bridge across Auckland. Yeah, I think it's woeful. We've been hammered. And that's probably the number one priority for us at the moment, is finance.
Daryl Butterick says he hopes the government will help them further in their time of need. It's 5 minutes past 6. The Black Caps are targeting dismissals of India skipper Virat Kohli and fellow batsman Cheteshwar Pujara as the key to keeping their hopes alive of winning the Test Championship final in Southampton. Heading into the final day, the Black Caps have a slight edge with India 64 for 2 in their second innings, a lead of 32 runs. While a draw remains the most likely outcome, Black Caps coach Gary Stead says they need to strike early on the opening session.
If we could get the two guys that are in now, Kohli and Pujara, out early, I think it would put India under a lot of pressure. They're obviously a quality batting order that run a lot deeper than that, but I think that might just put a lot of pressure on them to and maybe change the way that we can maybe attack a little bit more as well.
Meanwhile, former Black Cap teammates Dan Vettori and James Franklin will team up to coach the Birmingham Phoenix, the men's 100 side based at Edgbaston. England's advanced to the last 16 of the European Football Championship with a 1-0 win over Czech Republic. They'll now play either France, Germany or Portugal for a place in the quarterfinals. Scotland's dream of reaching the knockout stage of a major tournament for the first time is over after they were beaten 3-1 by Croatia. And the Māori All Blacks match against Manu Samoa in Wellington on Saturday will be played without a crowd after the region moved to Alert Level 2. That's the news.
You know, you're 16, play it cool, eat your dinner, don't drop your fork. And one of them comes by and says, cool hat, and I about melted into the floor.
This week on Champions of the Pacific, how a chance encounter with the Australian swim team left a lasting impression on Palau's first Olympian. Check us out at rnz.co.nz under the Pacific tab, or download us wherever you get your podcasts. Or listen in to Champions of the Pacific, Wednesday nights at 9:40 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service till midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland and Coromandel Peninsula fine apart from a few showers north of Kaikohe until this evening. Waikato, Waitomo and Taumaranui, also Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Generally fine, cloud and a few showers developing tomorrow night. Gisborne to Wairarapa, often cloudy with coastal showers tonight, fine tomorrow. Taranaki to Wellington including Taihape, fine tonight, partly cloudy tomorrow. A few showers for most but only brief morning showers for Wellington. Nelson, Marlborough, Canterbury, Otago and Southland partly cloudy. Showers about Stewart Island. Scattered rain developing in Southland and Otago Lakes tomorrow night. Bulla and Westland mainly fine at first. Few showers developing tonight, turning to rain in southern Westland late tomorrow. Fiordland, showers turning to rain tomorrow afternoon or evening with heavy falls. And Chatham Islands partly cloudy with a few showers. RNZ National, it's 8 minutes past 6.
Kia ora rā e ho, no mai hoki mai. If you've just tuned in, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The Wellington region is officially in Alert Level 2 after an Australian tourist tested positive after spending the weekend in the capital. The restrictions will remain in place until at least midnight Sunday, but will be reviewed by Cabinet that day. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
This is not a familiar experience for the capital, a brush with COVID-19, that sharp shock and learning someone with the virus has been in the community.
Out of an abundance of caution, the Wellington region will move to Alert Level 2 from 6 p.m. tonight, and that will run through at this point until 11:59 p.m. on Sunday.
The heightened precautions announced by COVID-19 Minister Chris Hipkins come after a breach in the Trans-Tasman bubble, the first time a case has crossed the border as part of the arrangement. Here's what we know. A Sydney tourist and his partner arrived in Wellington just after midnight on Saturday morning. The man, who's had one dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine, frequented numerous hotspots while on holiday, scanning his COVID tracer app as he went. But overnight Monday, he developed a head cold. He flew home at about 10:15 on Monday morning and got a test on his return. Last night, it came back positive.
We've always had plans in place for situations like this, and that is what we are working through now.
The Alert Level 2 conditions mean no gatherings over 100 people, strict rules on hospitality, and social distancing is back. Testing sites are gearing up and quarantine-free travel with New South Wales has paused. In fact, that decision was made before this case even came to light. But the biggest disruption, thousands of people who visited locations of interest have been directed to get a test and self-isolate for up to 14 days. The locations are listed in full on the Ministry of Health's website, but include the National Museum Te Papa, a supermarket, a packed Irish pub, and numerous cafes and restaurants.
Please, I encourage Wellingtonians and those who were in Wellington over the weekend to check that list to see if they were at any of those places of interest at that time.
First and foremost, we want to ensure that New Zealanders are not unnecessarily exposed to COVID-19.
But the Health Ministry did not publish the first locations until just before 9 o'clock this morning, by which point most people would have already arrived at work. More locations were revealed just before midday and then throughout the afternoon. The opposition says the ministry should have moved quicker.
400,000 people in Wellington have been out and about all day, not knowing if they were the ones who may be infected.
I don't know why they waited until after people got to work and therefore possibly compromised the health of their workmates.
But the authorities dispute they dragged their feet. The Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, says officials worked through the night to glean information from the individual and then assess the levels of risk.
I think they did a good job this morning of getting that information together. And if you look, I think as we've gone through our various cases and outbreaks here in New Zealand, we have got faster and faster at getting these locations of interest out.
Officials have worked quickly here and I am confident in their response.
A lot of details are still to emerge, with genome sequencing results expected later today. That will confirm whether the virus is the more infectious variant, known as Delta. It will also shed light on how the man caught the virus, with the current theory that he picked it up at his workplace, a healthcare centre in Bondi. So far, the tourists' 4 closest contacts in New Zealand have been tested and returned negative results. But it will be the results over the next few days, the thousands of tests throughout Wellington, which will reveal whether the capital is facing a more serious outbreak.
Well, we've just had an update from the Ministry of Health regarding the locations of interest and a clarification around Wellington Airport. So I'll read that to you. Public health officials have determined that only those seated in the food court at Wellington Airport between 8:30am and 9:55am on Monday, 21st of June, need to stay at home, get a test around day 5 after last exposure, and remain at home until a negative test result is received. Now, that is on their website. If in doubt, go check it out. It's under the heading locations of interest, and that is particularly in relation to the food court. So 8:30 to 9:55am, Monday the 21st of June is the window, and only if you are seated in the food court there, you get a test around day 5 and remain at home until you return a negative test. Now, if you're looking for a test today, there is one site that is potentially still open. Wellington Central, it's in Taranaki Street. Ministry says it will remain open until 9pm tonight, subject to demand, and will open again at 10am. In Porirua, there's Bedford Street, that's open again at 9am. Johnsonville Medical Centre, Moorfield Road, that will open at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Lower Hutt on High Street, open from 9 tomorrow. And Upper Hutt Hiratonga Christian Centre, that will open at 9am. So the one in Taranaki Street in Wellington Central, it's 196 to 200 is the street number. It will stay open until 9 tonight, subject to demand. Ko taku manuheria nei ko Professor Sean Hendy. Now, Sean's a COVID-19 modelling expert and the director of Te Pūnaha Matatini, and joins me now. Sean, level 2 in the Wellington region, you happy with that?
Yeah, look, I think so. I mean, ordinarily, I think we wouldn't be particularly concerned with this case, you know, on the scheme of things that we've faced over the last 18 months, because we have caught it relatively early and we do have a good understanding of its link to the border. So we're not really dealing with a situation where we might have undetected change of transmission out there. So level 2, I think, is probably the right thing. You know, there are two things that do make it a little bit more unusual, and so perhaps, you know, warrant that more cautious approach. You know, one is it's probably one of the new variants, probably the Delta variant, given the strong links to Bondi and Sydney. So that's probably the case. We'll learn that for sure probably tomorrow. And I think second, it's a test of our ability to work with the Australian system, to be able to share information with the New South Wales state contact tracing system, and I think that does warrant a little bit more extra caution than we might otherwise exercise.
Okay, two things there. Ministry of Health says it's operating on the basis that this is Delta, right? It's making that assumption until it finds out otherwise. Yep. So what does that mean in terms of modelling with a person potentially with the Delta strain of COVID?
Yeah, so based on data that's been coming out of the UK over the last weeks and months, we think that the Delta strain is about twice as transmissible as the original strain that we were dealing with last year. So perhaps under winter conditions, on average, you might think that people might pass the original strain onto 3 others if they're infected. Maybe with the Delta strain that might be 6. Of course, we're still dealing with a virus that does tend to spread by super spreading. So we could still see no cases from this person, or we could see a much larger number. We'll just have to sit back and really wait for these tests to come in.
Interesting, because health authorities in Australia have described the Delta variant as the Olympic jumper of COVID, meaning that it passes very quickly and through fleeting contact. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, look, it is more challenging to manage. We are dealing with a virus that does spread much more easily now than the one that we were dealing with last year. So we have to up our game. That does mean sticking to the basics that we learnt last year, but doing them really, really well. Making sure that we're really scanning wherever we go, and taking the public health advice seriously. Paying attention to those locations of interest, and if we can do that really, really well, then I would hope that we can avoid having to raise the alert levels more.
Okay, so the Minister has indicated probably likely that the travel pause of 72 hours will need to be pushed out. What do you reckon is realistic?
Yeah, look, it does look like there's been significant spread in Sydney. The New South Wales authorities tend to be more reluctant to use lockdowns. Say compared to Victoria, they tend to rely much more heavily on their tracing and testing systems, and that can mean that clusters like this take longer to eliminate. So, I'd be surprised if we see a resumption this week, and it could be extended well into next week.
And just very quickly, Sean, this person we know has had 1 AstraZeneca immunisation shot. So what do we know about how much you can spread if you've had 1 jab?
Yeah, it looks like a lot of the vaccines, aren't very effective just after your first jab. I mean, I think originally we hoped that maybe that first jab would be effective, but particularly with the new variants, it does seem like you really do need that second jab to get good protection against these new variants. So that single jab probably hasn't influenced the outcome in this case.
Thanks for your time. That is Professor Sean Hendy, COVID-19 modeller. It is almost 19 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. 13 new local COVID cases have been found in Sydney since last night, 8 of whom attended the same birthday party. Restrictions are ramping up again and the New South Wales Health Minister is warning of a real and present danger across the city. Max Toll has this report.
We've gone from that near and present danger to a very real and present danger, not just in a shopping centre, but right across Sydney.
13 new cases in Sydney, the most announced in one go during this latest outbreak.
We need to all take this seriously. We each have the future of our fellow New South Wales residents and our Sydney residents in our own hands.
New South Wales Health Minister Brad Hazzard saying now is not the time for stupidity or game playing. The State Premier Gladys Berejiklian echoing that comment.
Our contact tracing has been better than I've ever seen, but what we haven't seen before is the contagiousness of this variant of the virus. It is extremely contagious, and the fleeting exchanges, not even physical touching, has meant people have transferred the virus.
She's referring to the revelation yesterday that someone tested positive after simply walking past someone else with the Delta variant of the virus at the Bondi Junction shopping centre. Today's main concern, a super-spreading birthday party, according to the Chief Health Officer, Kerry Chant.
We've got 10 cases from that party, but all of those individuals would have unknowingly had the infection for periods of Monday, and that's why contact tracing is occurring related to a number of their movements.
As for the new restrictions, people who live or work in 7 affected areas are now unable to travel beyond metropolitan Sydney.
Restrictions apply to everybody living in Sydney, Blue Mountains, Central Coast, Wollongong and Shell Harbour.
Household gatherings are limited to 5 visitors, while people must now be seated in hospo venues. And bad news for people planning a karaoke night this weekend. No singing or dancing either, except for at weddings. Meanwhile, in Victoria, restrictions will actually ease from tomorrow night. The limit on public gatherings will be up to 50 people, and work from home recommendations will be lifted.
Vengeful liars who want to destroy him. That is Arthur Allen Thomas's lawyer's line to jurors set to decide his fate over rape allegations. But the Crown says the recollections of 5 people are reliable. Closing arguments have been heard in court today, with the judge due to sum up and send the jury out tomorrow. John Bond reports from the Manukau District Court.
The Crown case: why on earth would 2 women and 3 witnesses make up allegations of rape and indecent assault, recount them in detail all these years later if they weren't true? Here's Prosecutor Aaron Perkins, QC.
Now, I won't beat about the bush. Members of the jury won't thank me if I do. The Crown's position is that it is far-fetched in the extreme to suggest that they were just making all that up.
He said it's not only the complainants who say it's true. 3 other people also took the stand to support their allegations.
5 people have come along and committed perjury on the defence case.
Mr Perkins emphasised the evidence given by one man who said he was involved in some of these incidents and remembered specific details which largely matched what the complainants said.
You might think, based on everything you've heard, that it's just inconceivable that that man would come along and tell you the things he did. Why on earth would he do that, unless it were true?
That man's evidence, and the others, was disregarded by the Thomas defence team, led by lawyer Marie Dyberg, QC.
He said one thing, tries to back away, doesn't leave you with anything, then doesn't know, and then doesn't remember. You've got to say, you can't put weight on this. This is no value. You can't put weight on what he has said. It's just nonsense. He cannot be relied on, and he's not dependable.
Ms Dyberg said the complainants, the women, were dishonest and angry. The motive was money, and they threatened to take things further if Mr Thomas didn't pay them.
The potential for them to deliberately mislead you has increased dramatically, because once you start not telling the truth, it gets harder and harder to stop, because dishonesty has its own momentum.
She said they wanted revenge and ended up on a dangerous path that ended in the courtroom. Ms Dyberg said another supposed witness denied there was any sexual contact at all, contradicting the woman. She said the prosecution case was filled with too many inconsistencies and contradictions between witnesses for the jury to be sure, beyond reasonable doubt, that this happened.
This is real miscarriage of justice territory. We just need to take great care on this.
Judge John Bergsing is expected to sum up tomorrow before the jury retires to consider its verdicts.
Global trade experts are warning that people might not receive their latest online orders until Christmas. Stacks of shipping containers are currently piled up in Shanghai and other ports around the world. CNN's Tom Foreman reports.
Your new car, refrigerator, bicycle, sofa, computer, phone, even your next wine and cheese party could be in peril. Held up by massive supply chain delays affecting everything from Chardonnay to boba tea.
99% of the world's boba comes from Asia, mostly Taiwan.
and that means the whole country is running out of supply as we speak.
How did this happen? After long months of pandemic shutdowns, demand among American consumers shot up faster than expected. So high, the Port of Los Angeles just had its busiest month ever, handling more than 1 million containers. But on any given day, dozens of ships can't unload because there aren't enough dock workers to handle that massive surge.
They're in their own traffic jam coming, let's say, in the Pacific. There can only be a few that could step up to the plate and unload their cargo all at once, and then they have to go back to China and fill up some more.
Supplies are so shaky, Hyundai had to shut down a U.S. production line for a week. And Home Depot, one of the largest importers in the nation, has hired its own ship to bypass the bottleneck. On land, rail and trucking services are also stretched thin. Add a desperate shortage of shipping containers, and the price for sending one across the waves from June of 2020 through March this year more than quadrupled. That's one of several factors
raising the possibility that inflation could turn out to be higher and more persistent than we expect.
Persistent is the word, since some supply chain analysts are already predicting these troubles with summer shipping could affect Christmas shopping.
Imagine working for a company that decides everyone deserves a week off to avoid burnout. The dating app Bumble has done just that. The company says it's been busier than expected during the pandemic, so it's temporarily closed all its offices this week to give its 700 staff a breather. So is this an idea that's likely to catch on? The BBC's Rachel Wright reports.
The American company Bumble thinks its employees have been trying very hard indeed, so it's given them all a week off, on full pay, to switch off and think about themselves. The dating app, which allows women to make the first move, has had a very busy year. The number of paid users across Bumble and Badoo, which Bumble also owns, spiked by 30% in the 3 months of this year, so the company felt it owed its workers some time off. According to Professor Carey Ling Cooper at the Manchester Business School, the pandemic has caused extraordinary strain among many employees.
Mental health of people has been dramatically affected during this period of time. People actually have been working longer hours. They haven't had any commute time. And also they felt job insecure. And also people have been furloughed, which meant that the remaining people had heavier workloads. So for an employer to say, hey, I'm recognizing what you've been through the last 15 months, have a break, be with your family, do what you want to do, but no work.
Oh my God. Did I just make the first move?
Well, actually, Bumble isn't the first to make this move. The business site LinkedIn ordered its 16,000 global employees to take a week off in April. And the London accounting firm KPMG has launched a 4-day fortnight, among other measures, to offer support for its employees. Kevin Hogarth is KPMG's Chief People Officer.
We thought that having some time off, having a well-being day with everybody off at the same time, which I think is really important, we thought that this was the very best way to say thank you for all the support that they've offered to each other during this pandemic.
But quite a few companies have gone even further. Virgin, Netflix, and in India, Hindustan Unilever offer unlimited time off so that employees can feel a sense of empowerment over their lives. But here's a thought. The companies that are appearing to do the most for their employees are not the ones that have the most burnout. According to an index called Burnout Britain, the industries in the UK with the highest rate are construction and manufacturing, whereas the tech industry was the best industry for avoiding burnout.
Anything can happen. So, what are you waiting for?
Bumble's week-long shutdown may be part of a growing trend among tech companies to demonstrate just how flexible and caring they are, but few firms in other industries will be able or afford to do the same.
Some of your feedback before we head off. Bill reckons that there should be a weekly lottery for people who use scan codes. Was suggested nearly a year ago. Otherwise, enforce it like Australia does, says Bill. This person says Sydney has more people than the whole of New Zealand. We don't need a parade of overseas visitors from everywhere bringing this disease from their homes, workplaces or worldwide transport hubs. Don't forget, First Up will be with you from 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, speaking to the husband of wedding photographer Rachel Jordan, who was injured in that freak helicopter crash, and they'll be talking to her husband about how her recovery is going. Do tune in for that one, 5 a.m. Kei te hoki mai anō a popo whānau po Mārie. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow, same place, same time. Don't forget, you can go online, check out all our stories, especially the video ones.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Wellington region is now at alert level 2 after an Australian who spent the weekend there tested positive on his return to Sydney. The rest of the country remains at level 1. Healthline has taken on scores more staff as close contacts who didn't use the COVID tracing app are being told to contact them. The Medical Council has apologised to survivors of abuse in the adolescent unit at Lake Alice Hospital in the 1970s. The lawyer for Arthur Allen Thomas says the case against him has enormous inconsistencies to the point where he cannot be convicted. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
We have to take it day by day and keep our impartiality, our mission and code of ethics at the front of our mind and the security law at the back of our mind. Otherwise, we're going to go mad.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
No, I mean it. I think we need logistics engineers designing our hospital delivery service.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Thanks, Karen, and I'm Brian Crump, getting ready for another night on RNZ National, which commences after the news at 7. My first guest is the Dutch director Willemiek Kleifeld, talking about her latest documentary, The Taste of Desire, a cinematic essay exploring our deepest wishes through the eyes of 6 very different people from France, Sweden, New York, England, and Japan. And it's, I think initially the idea was to make a film about oysters, but it's become much deeper than that. And it's not just a titillating film either. That's the take that I've got from the notes that I've been reading. I'm going to have a little look at the documentary while we play the detail. And after 9, my guest is a specialist in the topic of utilitarianism. His name is Neil Vallely. He's a social theorist, and I think utilitarianism is the political economy devoted to building lots of stuff that we don't really need, and we end up feeling we lead futile lives. So how do you check out of that?